Welcome back to the Your Golf Performance podcast. We're joined with Mark Govier, a high-performance coach that works with players from all around the world on tour and also online now. Mark, thanks for joining the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me today. Appreciate it.
I'm looking forward to picking your brain. I've followed you for a while now on socials, and it was just the other week you put a post up about something, and I commented and said, I need you on the pod. Straight away, you're like, yep, we're in, let's go. Mate, do you want to, just for the listeners that haven't heard of you, do you want to just give us a bit of a background, how you got into golf, your early playing days, and then we'll get into coaching and player development?
Okay. Well, basically, I started golf when I was about 8 years old. My dad was an ex-professional football player, soccer player, if you're in the States. And when he finished playing football, he was like wanting a new sport, so he started playing golf. He used to take me down, and I would go with him. And I didn't really like it at the beginning. I was much more into playing football and rugby and all the other things. But he kept me going every week, probably to just allow him to go practice more by taking me with him.
Smart,
and then around about 10, I started playing a lot of more tournaments and starting to do pretty well. And then just from that age on was completely hooked. Played like multiple sports growing up, but some sort of half decent level. But really golf was like my passion. And then from that point onwards, really just worked my way through playing like junior golf and then county golf, and then got into the international side towards the end of 1996, 97. And then turned pro basically at 17. So started my PGA training then at a place called Klein Golf Club. It was like a club in the local area here. So I was working for a guy called Mark Govier, did my 3-year apprenticeship there. And then that's where the sort of journey into, playing professional golf. So I played on some mini tours. Back in the day, it was called the MasterCard Tour. It's now, the Europro, which is actually gone now, unfortunately. It folded a couple of years ago. So it was like a development tour to take you into like Challenge Tour and European. So played there in regional golf for a while. And then really was doing a lot of coaching, and that's sort of became my passion, was just sort of finding that I was enjoying coaching it more than playing it. And that was where the transition came then, sort of the early 2000s, where I was starting to do a lot more coaching at that point.
So you sort of got into it really young. I like 17, so you would have been, fully qualified by 19 or 20?
19, yeah. Which is different now, because I think now you have to be like 18 before you even start. But back in the day, I think you could even do it at 16. So, I was 19 qualified. And I was lucky because the guy that I worked for, Mark Govier, was a great dude, but brilliant golfer, very, very keen player, but just didn't like coaching at all.
Yeah.
So I was so lucky because by 17, he was like, I don't want to go coach you. You can go do all the coaching. So I was getting loads of reps in. I mean, I didn't have a clue. I mean, I was a year one trainee. I was 17 years old, teaching these guys who were in their 40s and 50s, but I was sort of getting lots of reps on the floor, and I was getting results. I was sticking to the basics. And, I was very lucky that started to get a little bit of a reputation locally coaching wise. So by the time I was, 19, 20, I delivered like thousands of lessons.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the guys that were doing their PJ training, they were going into their exam and they'd done 3 lessons or 4 lessons, So
and it was
a pretty lucky situation how it worked out.
It's funny for those younger coaches that are listening. You say you did lots of lessons, but lots of mistakes probably, right?
Oh, loads.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's one of those things. So did you, I want to tap into you a bit with your coaching side. Like, did you go and shadow coaches, or did you do much of that to try to sort of broaden your horizon?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, back then there wasn't,
it wasn't big.
This is like 1997. I mean, this is before probably some people on this podcast were even born. So it wasn't like YouTube was around and the internet and there was all these training courses. I was just learning on the go, and there wasn't really. I'd worked with some coaches personally, like in the county setup, the national setup. So I was getting some exposure by being around them, but it wasn't like the sort of shadowing stuff that you would experience now, or the ability to consume all these amazing things, these podcasts. You can learn so much by watching other people in different sports.
Yeah.
So really, I was learning more on the go. Learning on my own, and really the stuff that I came into sort of learning came a little bit later down the line. When the CPD courses started to come, and then the ability to go shadow other coaches. But certainly at that early age was very much just doing it myself. And as you said, just trying stuff and failing and trying some stuff, and it was working.
And then, like, obviously, this conversation, I think, is going to go for quite some time, but I want to know the timeline. So, obviously, like, late 90s, when did you start to, get to have conversations with some more elite players, sort of some better players started to pick up the phone?
Yes. Okay. So in 1999, a good friend of mine, Neil Roderick, was on. He was just going through qualifying school. He played Walker Cup. Neil was he's about 10 years older than me, but he was an amazing player. And even at that point, I was starting to just help him because I was at that point, I was probably like a year 3 trainee. So I was getting a little bit more. I'd done a lot more reps. I was starting to, coach some decent players locally. And when I say decent, it might be club champions and stuff like that. So they were like, good, but at the
Yeah.
level where I was at the time. And I started working a little bit with Neil and doing some stuff. And then eventually he got his card that year. Now, again, my coaching style at that point was a long way away from elite, very much a long way away from elite. But I kept to some basics and helped him. So I was starting to get a little bit of exposure of dealing with good players then. And then in 2003, when I sort of properly finished playing full time, I went to Hensall, and then I started coaching a lot more up there. That was based in Cardiff. I was working as a full-time coach then, nothing else. And I'd started to do the county coaching for Glamorgan juniors up there. And then I'd start to get more exposure to better players. So around that area was good. And then I got my first club pro job in 2004. And at that point, then I started to get a few internationals coming through. So it was like a slow burner, like you get one player, they do well, and then like anything, word of mouth sort of starts to spread, isn't it? Because it's that FOMO, isn't it? At that sort of elite level, everyone's looking at everyone else.
The magic pill.
Exactly. So as soon as someone plays well, they're like, hey, what have you done differently? And then hopefully, you get some good word of mouth that happens from there. So really from probably like 2003 onwards was where I was starting to really build my brand. I'd started my elite golf coach at that point. And again, at this point, I was certainly not an elite golf coach, but I knew my vision. I knew where I wanted to be, and I knew where I wanted to work towards. But I was still very early in that journey of exploration and sort of really growing my knowledge further.
Now, obviously, skills would have changed a lot over the last 20 odd years, but what do you think the most important qualities or skills for you to, there's going to be coaches that tune into this that want to coach that better class of golfer. I still have days where I hate it and then I love it. Like, sometimes you would know this, it's a lot harder work.
Oh, yeah.
Than the 20 handicapper that turns up steep. You can, get them swinging a little more behind them and they start making better contact and all of a sudden you're a genius. But it's a lot harder with the elite players. But could you pinpoint something that sort of says, once I learnt this, it made my eyes so much wider to these better players?
Yeah, I mean, it's so many different parts, isn't it? I think that sort of Kaizen mentality of like, I'm going to keep learning.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep exploring. I'm going to keep trying to upskill in every area. And as you said, when you're dealing with, a club golfer, they're coming there to sort out their slice or their misstrike or whatever it is. And it's relatively simple. You're providing technical information, isn't it? Once you deal with the elite player, one, their expectation is way, way higher. They're already highly skilled. So now you're looking at the finer stuff in the background. What are they practicing like? How are they eating and sleeping? What's their nutrition like? What's their mentality like when they go on the golf course? How do they react when they have setbacks? So I think it was just, I couldn't really pinpoint it to one more thing, but I would say it was just more taking a more holistic look at everything. And I would say if there was one part which will be a big part, was just really learning to manage the player. That was the biggest thing, is that when you're dealing with these elite level players, you're man managing or lady managing. You're managing the player rather than just delivering technical information. And that's the hardest thing. And these players really need to know you're bought into it, because they are seriously invested in getting better. They have very high expectations. And if they sense that you're not totally invested, you're done, and you have to be bought into these players. And I think that's the biggest thing that really has been a separator for me, is that I'm, very on board with their development. And I want them to do well as well as they do.
Your golf ball is the most technologically advanced, or it's not. Your golf ball is either the most consistent or it's not. It's the most trusted, or it's not. The fact is, it's either Titleist, the best performing golf ball in the world, or it's not. Prove it for yourself. Titleist, the #1 ball in golf. What will you play?
Yeah, I love that. So you obviously made the move from the UK to Texas to work at Altus Performance, somewhere that, I guess Cameron being an Aussie, sort of,
Yeah, yeah.
I guess you could say, it's a facility. Many of the listeners might not know of it, but I've, being a coach, I coach a lot of juniors. I've always looked up
Yeah.
to, not looked up, but you kind of look at, I go to their website and try to
Yes.
get as much info off that. What are they doing that I'm not doing? How did that job come about, and how do you feel like it helped you develop as a coach?
Okay, so it was basically in the middle of lockdown. I mean, like the UK just went, it was like pretty draconian. It got really locked down for a long period of time. I didn't work for like 7 months. So in that period, I was like, look, I can't stand about. I have to be busy. It's just the type of person I am. I'm not very good if I'm not being, every minute of my day is not being full. So I started doing some courses, and Coach Now, Spencer, Dennis, had done a course via Coach Now, which was basically they were selecting about 10 people for this blueprint program worldwide. And I was lucky that I was one of them. There was a guy in Australia, there was a guy in New Zealand, there was a guy from Japan. I was part of this initial sort of cohort, and it was really looking at our programs and what we were delivering and how we marketed ourselves. And I did the course all the way through lockdown. It was amazing. Spencer was awesome. And he was very, very complimentary about what I was doing. And he was like, hey, look, I'd like to put you in touch with some people. And I was like, well, I'm not really looking for a job. But he's like, okay, well, I got, Cameron here wants to speak to you. I was like, okay, well, I'll speak to Cameron, So, so me and Cam got on a call with Coy Lundberg, the CEO there as well, the next day, and we had a great conversation. And then 24 hours later, I had a job offer, and we were off to the States. So it wasn't like planned. It was very organic. But the opportunity to go work with those guys at Altus, because I think personally, they're the best in the world at what they do. I really do, especially seeing it on site. I know how good they are. So I think being part of that was amazing. Just again, how many good players they produce, and the system is very, very good. It really just does looks at the whole performance aspects and just really gets them to move to a different level. So yeah, that's how it came about. And then that obviously took about 6 months for the visa to go through, because it was COVID and everything was really slow. And then we landed basically end of 2021, and we were off and running. And Texas was amazing. I absolutely loved it. I'm definitely missing it. Definitely have some Texas blues at the moment when it's raining over here. But it was an awesome experience working with those guys.
What do you feel like you learnt the most?
A lot. I mean, I think there was certain things that I believe, we all do very well. I mean, coaching is excellent all over the world. There's amazing coaches everywhere, isn't it? And I just think working in that environment, I think the gameplay stuff was really impressive. The way that they would get players to practice and challenge them and test their skill, I think was really excellent. And just obviously the knowledge as well of all the coaches. They're all extremely knowledgeable. They all bring something different to the table. And I think what I loved was when I was with Altus, we really worked as a team. We'd collab on players. We'd have open conversations. We wouldn't try to keep everything to ourselves. It was very much like, hey, what do you think about this? Is there something I'm missing here? Even if the player's playing great, what do you think about this? What would you do in this situation to get them to practice this? What would you do when they're feeling this on the golf course? And I think that's just an amazing way to learn, is to sort of share and collab. So I think that was the biggest thing, is this that thirst to continually get better was the separator.
Hey guys, if you're struggling with your ball striking, I want you to head to golfperformancestore.com.au and look up this new product called the Pro Sender. It's a great key to educating your hands and wrists for a pro level swing. It's got a unique 3-in-1 design. The versatile tool helps you build better hand-eye coordination. It improves your ball striking, and you can nail those perfect swing positions that everyone's looking for. Get the Pro Sender today at golfperformancestore.com.au. Use the code YGP20 for a hefty 20% off at checkout. our little discussion off air, when you were there, you had 250 student wins. In
Yes.
how long? How many years were you there?
Just under 3 years.
That's crazy. So, having been around, here comes the trademark question, but having been around some of the best juniors in the world or best
Hmm.
amateurs in the world, what what do you see that separates the ones that are out there winning those events versus the other kids that might have been in your program, same level of coaching, same amount of practice hours, but the ones that just don't sort of ever be able to win?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mean, there's obviously this technical skill, isn't it? But ultimately, they're sponges. The best players are extremely receptive to anything they can do to get better. And I think that's the separator from even some kids that can be very set in what they do and they're a little bit less inclined to make change. But the best players, they want to absorb everything they can possibly do, and they have great attitudes and they're willing to go out there and work hard. And there's lots of there's lots of aspects to performance, isn't it? But I do believe that the best players, they're just so extremely driven from inside, not from the
Yeah,
parents. It's really
yeah,
coming
they
from
want to.
them. And they've got a passion for it. And I think ultimately, when you have a passion for it, you're more likely to want to go out and do it every single day. When it's coming
Yeah.
from an external source, it's just not quite so hard to push yourself through when you're having those bad days either.
How many hours was the average kid in that program spending practicing?
I mean, 'cause some of them were homeschooled. So we had quite a big, myself and Nick, when we were at the Old American, we ran a homeschool program there. So we had about 4 or 5 of those running a week. And they would be then probably an hour and a half to 2 hours per session. Plus, they'd be having individual sessions as well and their own practice. I mean, some of these kids are practicing 7, 8 hours a day. I mean, because they were in a homeschool environment, they would do their homeschooling around it, and they'd go to their PT in the morning, or they would do their physical training, and then they would come out and they would practice, and they would play, and then they would have their coaching. So the advantage of the off campus in America or the homeschooling environment, it certainly allows them to get a lot of additional hours in, and quality hours as well, because they were part of our program. They wouldn't just be going out there and just hitting balls aimlessly. There was always a structure to what they were doing. So they were really making sure they were maximizing their time rather than just standing hitting balls on a range aimlessly.
And like obviously gym work and was physio I guess physio, chiro, all that. Was that all part of it? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we had our guys that we would send people to. So we had our strength and conditioning guys. We would have our chiros. We would have sports rehab. So we would try to pull in all the performance stuff, bring them all together, look at all their skills, their technical skills, working on their sports psychology. As part of our programs, we'd have covering all these different aspects of preparation, course mapping, alter ego, all these little things that they would, I wish I'd known that when I was a player.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just hitting balls. I was that guy just hitting balls aimlessly and just hoping to dig it out in the dirt. But they were just so well versed, so knowledgeable at 10, 11, 12 years old that I think they would know more than most mini tour players already at that age, because they were just exposed to it so early.
I believe coaching has just evolved so much. Like,
Amazing.
I'd say you and I are a couple of years apart or, probably similar age. And there was nothing really we had a clinic once a week at 2 p.m. on a Saturday. It was $2. There'd be 35 kids go to it. Get about 20 seconds with a coach, and then you
Yeah.
just go and play 9 holes. But that was, I've raised this quite a few times with players that have come on here, and all of us as kids just played golf. We just went and, you'd play 18, 36 holes in a day. You just got dropped at school. Got dropped straight from school, straight to the golf course, practiced until dark, got picked up. Obviously, it's changed a lot now. Everything's very structured. Kids will come to a golf or facility and they've got training planned out for them and that. But I just think I would have loved to have had something like what Altus has.
Yes.
If I was a kid, probably couldn't have afforded it, but it's just so different now compared to 25 years ago.
Without a doubt. And I think, look, there's definitely a lot to be said about being in a peer group. I was very lucky when I was a junior. Our junior team were insane. It was so good. It was like a golden era. And I came in at a 10, 11-year-old, and I just had all these kids who were above me who were just amazing golfers. So I was very, very lucky. And that peer group, I got pulled along by them. I didn't have a lot of coaching until I really got into any sort of national and county setups. But it's still a lot to be said for going to go play golf as well. There's a happy medium, isn't there? But we need to still go out there and enjoy it and be athletes and get on the golf course and learn to get the ball around. But there's also this bit where, like, when I'm practicing, what am I doing? Let's turn up with some sort of plan. So there's a blend in there somewhere, isn't there? Which is suitable for every player, and every golfer at every level needs a slightly different formula to each other to perform their best.
So obviously, coaching some of the higher level players in the UK and then swapping over to the US. 2-part question. Did you see a difference between the Yanks and the Brits player wise, like attitude or, ability or anything? And then also was your coaching style a little different and then altered a little bit after Altus? Like, I guess and then obviously we're in a whole different realm over in Australia. I think everything's similar. But
Yes.
Did you notice anything different?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a bigger pond to fish from, for sure. And then in America, that's without a doubt that there's a huge amount of talent. We've got talented golfers here in the UK. And I worked with some great players before I left the UK that were exceptional and have gone on to already go to college in America. And there's a few coming behind that will do that. But ultimately, there's a bigger pot to fish from. So that definitely helps. But they're very, very driven. They have a lot of time where they can come to see you. So the biggest thing for me was when they were coming to me, I wasn't seeing them once a month. I wasn't seeing them once every 3 weeks. I was seeing them 4 or 5 hours a week. Some of these kids were in our coaching program as in a group, and then also go into individual as well. So the difference is you could structure your time with them. You could get more deep into all the different aspects. Whereas normally when you're seeing a player, you're putting out fires sometimes. You see them once a month.
Yeah.
Hey, what are you struggling with at the moment? Let's focus on that one thing. But when you're with them weekly or multiple hours in a week, you're like, hey, Kate, today we're doing short game. Tomorrow we're going to play some holes, going to do some strategy work. The day after that, we're going to work on some ball striking. Then the day after that, we're going to have a review and we're going to sit down, do some classroom work. We're going to plan for the next tournament. Well, I mean, like, how much you can't compare that, can you? Because it's just you have the ability to spend more time for them, so you have ability to have a bigger influence on them. So that's probably the biggest thing that was the difference, was they have the ability to have more time with you. Yeah. And then you can have a big influence on them as a result of that.
It's amazing. It's making me want to, I don't know if they allow it, but I'd love to just go and be a fly on the wall over there for a week and just watch what they do. I think it would be such an amazing thing for any coach or any person that has anything to do with junior golfers around the world, like just going and watching those guys for a week, watch them coach their high-end players. I think you'd take so much away from it.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to do. And I know all the guys are very receptive, including myself. And when I was here and now I'm here, and when I was in Altus, that we were always happy to share. I think that's how we all get better ultimately, isn't it? We all get better by sharing. I think by trying to keep it all in, you just become, like you said earlier on, you're not that sponge you. So it's good both ways to give back and show what you've learned, and then also have interactions with other coaches. I used to sometimes, when I was watching my assistant pros years ago, when I was at my old club, there's certain things I'd watch and be like, yeah, I really like the way he structured that game. I wouldn't have thought about doing that. So I think we don't always have to be learning off the best. We can learn off everyone around us and just see the new methods that are coming out. I think it's great. I mean, just sharing is definitely the way to get better.
Yeah. Are there any specific traits, bearing in mind a lot of parents tune into this to try to get little gold nuggets out of the best coaches, right? Any specific traits that you might look for or see in players that show you that this kid, like they could be 10 or 11, this kid is going to be a great player?
Yeah,
it's a hard question.
It's there's obviously the skill thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Certain kids, they certainly pick it up quicker than others. Determination, I think, for me is always the thing I get most excited about, when you just see that drive from the kid to want to get better. And I've seen kids that, I've worked in the past that have come at a very basic skill level and they ended up being great players because they're just so committed to the process of getting better, and they love it and they enjoy it. And like I said to you earlier on, they're driven from the inside to get better. So I think that's an important part of it. I think finding your formula is an important part for any player, whether you're a junior or an elite performer at the highest level. You've got to understand and be reflective of like, what makes me perform well? And we used to talk about this a lot with our players. What's your best performing self look like? Like, what does that look like? You've got to know what that is. That means how you eat, how you sleep, how you train, how you practice. And then when you turn up, what do you look like? Who are you when you're on the golf course? What's your swag like? You know, like what are your characteristics? We talk about this with our sort of alter ego. We'd say like, you know, if I was looking across at the best performing Brent, what would that look like? You know, what does he have his chest out? Does he play a certain way? Is he smiling? Is he steely? And I think all those little things they take time to really find it. And if you look at the top players, they have that formula, and it all varies. They're all different, but they have a certain type of approach and a certain type of persona when they play golf. From a Nick Faldo to a Lee Trevino, you know, very, very different characters. But this worked for Trevino, this worked for Faldo. You know, there's no right or wrong, but they know over a period of time by trying stuff what works for me. And then being reflective and going, when I played bad, what did I do differently? What do I not want to act like? What do I not want to perform like? Did I over practice? Did I come out there too intense? You know, those are things that are important.
I think one of the things that is probably really underutilized, what you've said it a few times already in this podcast, that's why I'm bringing it up, is like nutrition. Like there would be so many people that are just eating crap even the night before. They wake up, they feel sluggish the next day, and then they're like, you know, oh, I played so poorly this morning. Well, have a look at what you did last night. You might have had 10, like not juniors, but like even 21-year-olds. Like I remember what I was like as a 21-year-old, right? And you're from the UK, so I guarantee you were probably the same, right? There would have been a few beers maybe the night before, and you wake up the next day and you're like, I don't even know how I'm going to put the ball on the tee. And then you have the audacity to question your technique at the end of the round. Like, oh, I hit it so poorly today. So is that something that was really driven at Altus, was about nutrition or not?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think just every bit of anything that was going to lead to you performing better had to be covered. And I think once you get past that initial, like, okay, technically you're improving, it's all those softer skills that you can't see. So I used to be linked into a lot of my players' whoop bands.
Yes.
So that was one of the things that I was sort of quite big on, was like, when they would tell me, hey, I played poorly down that last stretch, 13, 14, 15. The first thing is, right, okay, did you eat and drink? Oh yeah, eat and drink. Well, what did you eat and drink? Did you eat something sugary? Were you having a Gatorade and a chocolate bar? Because that's where a lot of people think elite nutrition looks like. So there's the first thing. And the second bit is, what do you sleep like the night before? What were you doing? Because I'm looking at your recovery and you had like 19% recovery, but it says you're in bed at 11 or 11 o'clock. So why was your sleep so bad? And then I remember this with one of the girls that I worked with on one of the mini tours. She's a good player, and she kept having really bad red recoveries. And I was like, hey, what's going on with this recovery? Because it seems like you go into bed early, but your quality of sleep is terrible. So what are you doing before you go to bed? Oh, I'm playing Call of Duty. I'm like, oh my God. So she's basically online playing Call of Duty for like an hour and a half, but still going to bed but she's had like flashing imagery in like in the middle of a war zone, and then her sleep is awful. So I'm saying, like, your PlayStation's banned. You're not allowed to use that anymore. And eventually she got rid of that, and her performance started to pick up. So there's the softer skills that sometimes you just don't notice unless you really start digging deep.
Where are you finding the time to do all this though?
Exactly. Yeah, I know.
Like really, when you think about it, if you've got a high amount of players as well, and you're logging in and checking their whoop and doing it, like, I guess that's what it takes to become a great coach. You're looking at everything other than, I mean, you are looking at their swing, but there's a lot of other little key elements that can cause performance issues, right? But, you know, you'd think something like that, once you tell that girl once, surely she's not doing the Call of Duty before she goes to bloody bed or anything, right?
Exactly. Well, look, and this is the thing that sometimes, like in the session, I would say one of the biggest things that I've learned from being coaching at the elite level now is more like we spend a lot of time chatting at the beginning, like a lot, because I want to dig into the detail. I want to review the last tournament, how they played, like that sort of conversation happened on the practice tee. So, I mean, I'm always looking at the stuff in the background, but just having that extra bit of time at the beginning, not rushing into the session, is sometimes gold. And then in that little 15, 20-minute exchange, sometimes we might be in there for an hour of lesson, we might hit balls for 20 minutes. But in that 40 minutes of chatting, we've picked out so many important things. Whereas I think sometimes we're just programmed to do it. Okay, let's get them warmed up. Let's start hitting balls and like look at the golf swing. But really, it may not be a golf swing issue. It could be exactly what I just said there, which is something that would have been missed if I hadn't have had that conversation at the beginning.
Do you work minimum 1 hour sessions? Like, or do you go 2 hours or?
Yeah, I mean, in the States, I mean, a minimum of an hour, but a lot of clients would come for two. If I had clients flying in, we'd have clients flying in from all over the world. You know, they might come for half a day or a day. They might book half a day for like 2 or 3 days, and then you'd have multiple hours. Well, especially if they were playing like tour events.
Yeah,
and they might fly in, and spend 3 days with me, and then we spend like 12 hours over those 3 days. So, but a minimum of an hour, just because there's just so much to dig into generally.
And then
I think it helps as well because like a lot of time we'd have this stats. So for example, if our players, we work with them regular, I would have the stats. So before they turn up for the first session, I would have looked at the stats and almost be leading the session for them a little bit. I'd obviously ask their opinion, but then I'd have the stats saying, hey, look, from 6 to 12 foot, you were 30% below tour average this week. So like, let's look at your start line work. Let's look at your green reading. So you can help, sort of guide them a little bit rather than let them guide you too much.
Yeah. What about working with students that just have that negative mindset? So like, obviously it's hard because you're going to have some kids or whatever that come through the program and everything you tell them, they take on board. You spoke reference to sponge. They take it in. They're pretty happy about it. But then you'll have that one kid that, or not one kid, there's probably multiple that is on a great projection and is either unhappy at the speed or he gets jealous of other players or, I've referenced it on this pod before. There's always that kid that hits a shot and has to detail why it was poor every single time to kind of like justify to everyone around that they are better than what they actually just, produced off the tee there. Do you have any, whether it's for a parent that's listening or a coach that's got someone in their program like that, how do you deal with a kid like that that's just always drawn to the shit rather than being happy with the good?
Yeah, I mean, it happens at all levels, doesn't it? Like from the juniors to through the high school years, particularly, the overreactors, they're overreacting to every shot. And I think it's then you have to pull them on it. It's the first thing. You have to make them aware of it. Yeah. Not ignore it. Pull them in the session if need be. I've done it before. Hey, look, if that reaction happens one more time, we're stopping. We're going inside because I'm not going to tolerate it because you're representing yourself and you're representing me and you're representing this brand and you're representing your parents. So let's try better. Okay. So there's this bit where you initially have to make them aware of it. And then you also have to get them to understand expectations. Hey, let's look at the stats. All right. Let's look at like, what are you expecting to hit out of this golf shot? How many greens do you expect to hit in a round of golf? Let's let them manage that expectations. Average tour player is going to hit 11 greens. Average scratch golfer is going to hit about 7 greens. So why are you getting annoyed when you're coming in and you've hit 12 greens in regulation? So let's manage those expectations a little bit and make them aware of, hey, if you hit this shot 10 times, a tour player is only going to hit the green 6 times because it's over 200 yards. Okay. So let's manage that. So I think that's a part of it is just getting them to be aware of it. And also, I'm a big believer in it. I know Altus the same. I hate negative self-talk. So I don't want to hear you say about bad things about yourself because that's like being in an abusive relationship and it's only you to blame. So I think making people aware of that, catching them on it and making it fun as well. Like, hey, okay, every time you do that, that's a quarter you owe me or it's $1 you owe me or you got to give me 10 press ups, and just, you can make it in a fun way, but you have to ultimately catch the player and make them uber aware of it because if they're doing it with you, you can guarantee they're going to be doing it in a play environment,
You just reminded me of one of the high school programs that I coached one day. We probably, we sort of vary up our practice. It's 2 sessions a week and we might do, range, short game. I try to take them on the course, every 3rd session sort of thing. And we played a game one day where every negative reaction was a 1-shot penalty. and they had to play the 9 holes, and it was, I think one of the kids had like 12 penalties, and like 6 of them were on one hole because he held it in for 4 holes. And I think what they don't understand is there's a lot of things that they do that is just normal for them that they don't understand is actually
100%.
negative.
100%.
Just the shrug of the shoulders, the head drop, the the slamming the club in the bag because they're frustrated. There's just so many things that can just add up to them thinking that they're worse than what they are.
Without a doubt. Look, and I think, like you said, it's a habit, isn't it? And the way we talk, the way we react to stuff is a habit, but it doesn't mean you can't change that habit. You just ultimately need to be aware of it. And if you're aware of it, then it's the first steps to make an adjustment, isn't it? And I think it's one of those things that we don't think will make a difference, but it has a huge difference, because positive mentality definitely is a separator at the elite level. It's not to say you're not going to get frustrated. And I say this to kids all the time. I'm not asking for you not to be frustrated or annoyed. I just don't want to see it spill into the next shot, or I don't want to see it spill into a helicopter club down the fairway. There's a difference, isn't it? Like, we're going to feel emotion. We're human beings. It's part of who we are. But the difference is you have to recenter and be able to get back into the next shot. And we don't want to be saying too many negative things for ourselves, because particularly with putting, when people say, I'm a terrible putter, I'm such a bad putter, I do not want to hear that. Because
that was me as a kid.
There we go. You're that guy. You keep on saying it. You're going to eventually start to believe it, and then that's a problem then, because you could have the best stroke in the world, but the mind is telling you can't do it.
And you know what? And this is the thing. From a very young age, I reckon now I was probably a bad green reader, and because I kept telling myself I was a bad putter, I couldn't putt. I'd hit 15, 16 greens around, and I'd shoot, 2 over, sort of. I was one of those guys, right? And I remember the first time I got put on Putt Lab, and my mate said to me, "You stroke it so good." But the problem was, I think I'd just got over every single putt and just told myself. And
narrative.
I think it was probably 6 years ago now, I went to one of the coaching summits in Orlando, and John Gordon, have you heard of John Gordon?
Yeah.
He got up and spoke, and he's all about power of positivity. And one of the things he said was, every person has a negative and a positive dog, and you have to choose which one you're going to feed. And it's basically, and what you were just sort of saying, like, people just, it's like being in an abusive relationship with yourself.
Yeah. And it's the worst thing, because you're doing it to yourself, isn't it? But I mean, I just think that I would rather try to go out there with a positive mindset and be like, hey, I missed that, but okay, I misread it. All right, cool. That's fine. That's not a negative. That's making a reflection and going, okay, I need to do that better. Okay, what's the pattern? I'm missing that left. Okay, let me work my start line when I go in. There's adjustments we can make, rather than like, hey, I'm so bad. I can't believe you missed that again. You're so bad at putting. And just like, I just see that all the time. And the same thing, you just got to catch them on it and just try to change that narrative. Because if you can change the narrative, you can change the way that mentally you think about things, and that just definitely starts to affect your performance in a good way.
Yeah. Let's talk about you coaching at the Olympics. Let's talk us through that.
So it was 2 players that I was working with when I was over in the US. So Alban Valenzuela, who was playing for Switzerland, it was actually her 3rd Olympics. She's only 26, but it was her 3rd Olympics. She's played in her first one as an amateur. She's a top 50 in the world player, playing LPGA, exceptional player. And then Ashley Lau was a lady I started working with off the back of some of the work that I'd done with Juliana Hung, who played on Epsom Tour, went on to win an event there. She's sort of close to getting her card for LPGA this year. And she was referred across from seeing the work that I'd done with Juliana. And I'd worked with her, and she was on Epsom Tour, and then she was representing Malaysia. So I had the 2 players. Now, with Alban, she's very much got her routine, so she was just getting on with her thing. I was there. I was like the fire extinguisher on the wall if any problems happened, but she was great, and she finished 13th. And then Ashley with her first Olympics. So I was with her a lot with Team Malaysia, and we were just doing a lot of prepping, getting them ready for the tournament, looking at, I don't know if you've ever played that Golf National. It's so hard. I mean, the rough was like this. I mean, it was hard for the guys to advance out of it. I mean, I saw Scotty Sheffield hit a shot like 50 yards, the 7-iron out of it. It was really thick stuff. fast, slopey greens, super narrow fairways. So we knew it was going to be a battle at the beginning of the tournament. And again, managing the expectations. One of the things we talked about with Ashley was like, hey, look, be ready. You're going to have to make a lot of up and downs. You're sometimes going to have to make up and down from 60, 70 yards because you've hacked one out. It's just being ready for what was going to be a war of attritions that week. And she played fantastic. First round, she shot level par. She played brilliantly under a lot of pressure. She was very nervous the first day. And she had a great tournament. She finished in the top 40 overall, first time. So great experience for her. But it was just amazing for me personally. Obviously, dream to be at Olympics because, being around, seeing the best players in the world and being able to help two players at that was really, a special experience that certainly will go down in the memory banks.
That's amazing. Did you get to did you get to go and watch any other sports?
I didn't in the end, to be honest. So I arrived on the Saturday, so I watched the end days of the men's event. So I followed Tommy Fleetwood for a while, and then I followed Scotty down the last few holes. So I got to see a lot of the men's event. Obviously, it was great there because I'm very lucky. We were in the clubhouse. We were with all the players, so I got to sort of see them all and watch the medal presentations. It was amazing. But generally, I was there all day. I mean, I was getting there 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. I would set up her putting drills. She might arrive at 11, so I'd like to get there early, prep everything, get my spot on the green because it can be difficult getting a spot on the green with lots of coaches everywhere. Yeah. So I'd set up my drills, go have some breakfast, then she'd arrive, we'd have a chat, and then we were just there all day. So putting drills, short game, range work, go play 9 holes, come back in, review anything we need to do, and then she'd go, and then I'd go. By the time that's done, I'm whacked. I'm ready to just chill out and then get going again for the next day.
So obviously we spoke before about your players at Altus and how many hours they would put in per week. You work with players on, multiple tours around the world. How many kind of started this podcast to make parents realize how many hours a week actually go into these high-end players? How many hours a week do you reckon that they're putting into their practice, these other players from around the world?
I would say on the tours, 40 hours. It's like a job. They're ultimately putting in the equivalent of a 9 to 5, plus all the additional things in the background. That's not just practice. That'll be doing their mobility and strength work. That might be doing meditation and sort of visualization stuff. There's so much stuff. There's mirror work they're doing in the background. There's just so many things that they're doing that sometimes they're almost living and breathing it. It is sort of all encapsulating really as they're at that elite level. But their routines will change very different for different players. I've seen some that are very heavy on playing, and I've seen some that are very heavy on form work, and they like the feedback and they get a lot of confidence from the evidence of good form. So everyone's really different in what they do. And there's no steadfast, hey, this is the way you've got to do it. But you just got to know, again, what your formula looks like ultimately.
Meditation, you just touched on it there. Is that something that you might prescribe to people that you think needed or would benefit from it?
Oh, that I think it's amazing. I mean, and certain players need it, certain players don't. But I think it's a way of just calming the mind and just trying to get more relaxed, because some players just naturally a little bit more amped up, so they just need sometimes that little bit of time where they can just be still and be a little bit more relaxed. I love the visualization, the manifesting. Before a tournament, one of the things I talk about with players is sometimes just sit in a chair quietly, stare into the space, close your eyes, whatever it is. Think about the shots, think about the first tee. Picture the people around, picture the shot coming out, what it's going to look like, how it's moving down the fairway. Because I think being able to visualize it in your head prior to the round certainly helps you. There's no guarantee it's going to happen, but I think there's definitely some benefits in players doing that.
I think manifestation is real. I think it's huge. Sure, and one thing, I know no one tunes into these podcasts to listen to me. It's all about you guys. But reference to the meditation, the players that I have advised to do it, I say to them, imagine you have a glass of water and it's 3/4 full, and the liquid inside of it is your anxiety, right? It's 3/4 full. And you get to the first tee or you get to the 18th hole and you're in the lead and there's a shitload more nerves and someone tips more water into your cup, what's going to happen? Well, it's going to overflow. All right. Well, imagine that we could do some breath work,
Yeah,
meditation, whatever, and get that cup that was 3/4 full to a quarter.
yeah,
And then you tip all those nerves in that extra cup in there. Where's it going to go? Oh, it's going to go halfway, 3/4. That's the way I've been able to get it across to kids
yeah.
over the years of like, oh yeah, okay, well maybe it would be better to, you know, have less in my cup to start with. And that's just coming from someone like I've dealt with anxiety my whole
Yeah.
life. Well, the last 20 odd years. And if you're already practicing meditation and then something stressful pops up, it seems some days it just feels like nothing. Whereas if you're already heightened,
Yes.
something stressful comes up, it can throw you over the edge.
Without a doubt. And I think this is going back to maybe a point later on, is that we were talking about, the nerves you're going to feel in a tournament situation. And I think players feel like they shouldn't feel it. I'm like, get that out of your head.
That's
You're
normal.
going to feel nervous. So don't create an expectation that you shouldn't feel nerves. That's the first problem, because then when it
Yeah.
happens, you go into panic because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm nervous. Whereas like, yeah, you're going to be nervous because
Yep.
it means a lot to you. It's you put a lot of time and effort into it. You want to try to perform your best. So there's this, obviously, you have to embrace the nerves. That's the first thing. So be ready for it, but also have some mechanisms in place. Like you said, the breathing is a huge one. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying like breathing, like when you're over the ball, taking one or two deep breaths. It's too late. You've got to be doing this like part of your process. You walk up to the ball, part of your pre-shot routine, and it will help sort of bring that sympathetic system under control, that fight or flight. It
Yeah.
will help control it. So there's lots of different ways that we do it. But I think breathing is something that definitely is underrated, and people quaff at it like, oh, breathing, it's just breathing. But no, it isn't. It really does have an effect on how our system reacts. So I think that's a really, really important one, and just be ready for the chaos of golf and the nerves. And I think the more you're ready for it, when it happens, you're like, okay, I know this is going to happen. So, I'm not going into panic, when this happens.
Yeah. I feel like this next question, I always write questions out and I share it with you guys prior, but I feel like this next question, we've kind of answered this, but I'm still going to ask it anyway, right? So
Okay.
what advice would you give to a young player that knocks on your door and wants to be the best player they can be?
Work hard. Okay.
Yeah.
First and foremost, be willing to work hard, probably trying to work harder than anyone else, because remembering that there's thousands and thousands of kids, hundreds of thousands of golfers in just America alone want to get a college scholarship. So, for example, so the competition is going to be high. So you have to be ready to put the dedication in, but really look at all the different aspects of what are going to make you play well. Yes, you want to, obviously be technically good, but you need to look at all the different things that are a part of it. So that you eating, your sleeping, your nutrition, how you practice, how you react on the golf course, how your mannerisms are. These are all important parts of what makes an elite performer.
Yeah.
And then I think really importantly, find a good coach. Find a really good coach that has a good track record of, creating performance and has maybe some success. And stick with them and commit to them. And if they're bought into you, then, create that relationship just like Cameron and Jordan have since 12 years old, and along that way, they've had some incredible ups and some incredible downs. That's just part of golf, isn't it? It's not all going to be a perfect thing, but the trust is there because he's a world-class coach, so trust your coach, work hard with them. And then if you do those things, you're really addicted to the process of getting better, you will come out, a good player at the end of it, or at least achieve whatever your potential is.
Yeah. And then a follow-up from that is, and their parents? What?
I mean, support them. I think, look, I've got kids in sport, and, we all want our kids to do as well as possible. Don't be afraid to let them fail. I think there's too much of the puppeteer that goes on with parents. They're over the top trying to pull the strings and just make them do everything. Let them go, let them fail, let them caddy themselves at an earlier age. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to make errors, but they will take more accountability that way if you let them just do that more often. I think too often parents they're doing it out of the right intentions. Don't get me wrong. They're doing it because they love their kids and they want them to do well, and they don't want them to they want them to win their tournaments and have a success. But they've got to understand that the kid will learn best sometimes by having that little bit of autonomy. And I think that's an important part. Support them when they win, but support them when they lose as well. Don't be too hard on them just because they're serial winners and then suddenly they go through a period of not winning. You've got to watch the narrative that sometimes the parents use towards the players. I've had parents sometimes say, "Yeah, but he's not a good putter. Like, please stop saying that." Or he's not very good at chipping. Like, you've got to, like, those little things. They're our mums and dads. They are the most important people in our lives, and whatever you say is gospel to them. So you just got to be very, very careful. The narrative you use. Remember, they are kids, and they are very sort of susceptible to what we say as parents.
How do you guide players through plateaus or, when they've had setbacks?
I mean, I think same thing, just make them aware that there is going to be plateaus. And I do it sometimes. I just bring up like results of the top tour players. Okay, I don't bring up Scotty Scheffler because the guy's a freak at the moment,
Yeah.
But that at some point has to come to an end, like almost like the Tiger Woods thing. It was just insane, wasn't it, what he was achieving? But if you look at the 99.9% of the golfing world, of the top players in the world, and I look at their stats and I show it to players, they're like this. They're missing cuts. They're finishing 40th. They're finishing 30th. Then all of a sudden they go first, second, third. And then all of a sudden they'll just plot down. So I think you've got to understand that we are human beings. We're not robots. So we are going to see variability through a year, and be ready to accept that. And I think that's like, we want to go play our best. We certainly want to try our best, but we've got to understand that along the way, there is going to be these ups and downs. But if you keep doing the right things in the background, you will eventually get to the goal. You will get the results, but don't expect it to be overnight. It's almost like, imagine someone trying to go on a weight loss journey. They don't go to the gym the first day and expect to be where they need to be in 90 days time. But if they keep
doing that for 20 years, mate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you keep eating properly, and you stay off the fatty foods and the sugary stuff. Then eventually, over a period of time, you're going to see the result. And it's very much like that with golf. It's frustrating for players sometimes, and I totally get it. It's because we work hard for 6 weeks and they don't see the results. Well, it's like, well, you might see a lag. That 6 weeks of work might not show up for 3 months. There's always a lag, unfortunately, And when you get lazy because you're playing well, there's always a lag with that. And then eventually that lag will catch up with you. So I think that's the thing, is just be addicted to the process of getting better.
I love it. Mate, before we wrap up, what do you reckon the best piece of advice you've been given in life or golf?
Oh, my gosh.
Over the years?
Well, now you put me on the spot. That's a tough one. But
I would say that was in the show notes. No.
Okay, yeah, I didn't read that one. Okay, so what I would say is, just the biggest thing is just try to keep getting better every single day. And I think there's, rather than one particular like nugget where if you just keep on trying to get better every day, if you're a coach or if you're a player, what can I do that will make me a bit better today? Whether that's putting that little bit of extra practicing, whether that's doing a bit more mirror work, whether that's doing your meditation, whether that's going to the gym, or for us as coaches, watching that podcast, reading that book, watching something useful on YouTube. Just keep learning. And if you keep learning every single day and trying to get better, it's only going to help you in the long run.
That's all. It's something that I try to live by, and even with my kids, I got a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, and if they whinge to me about, I didn't get this or I didn't get that, well, did you put the work in? Oh, not as enough. All right. Just keep doing little things add up over many days across a year. Mark, this has been amazing. No doubt there will be someone that's listened to this that goes, I want my son or daughter to, speak to you. Obviously, you do a bit of online now before you get your facility in the UK. Just go for it right now. Give yourself a free plug, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, yeah, appreciate it. So anyone, you can follow me on Instagram is probably the easiest one to find me on. That's Elite Golf Coach. I'm also on YouTube under Elite Golf Coach or Mark Govier. You can search for any of those. Or my website is www.elitegolfcoach.com. So basically, Elite Golf Coach across all platforms. You can find me there. And then if you, again, on Skillist, that's where I do a lot of my online. That's under Mark Govier on that one, or Elite Golf Coach will come up. And again, I'm working with players, all abilities from, the recreational golfer, but particularly through to players that are looking for sort of higher performance through junior level tours and onwards.
Perfect, mate. I'll pop all that for the listeners into the show notes as well, so that they can just click links and take them straight to your page.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Mate, thank you so much for coming on. I truly appreciate it.
No, man, look, I love the podcast. It's been great to chat to you, and good to hear your sort of journey as well. And really appreciate you taking the time to get me on here. I know there's a lot of people out there, so I feel honored to be on here.
Appreciate it.